Hello, loves. It's Nina Kovner, and welcome to the premiere episode of Building and Breaking How Brands Are Built and Trust is Broken. In this first episode, we are going to talk about Costco. We're going to talk about how Costco has built and protected one of the most trusted brands in retail, from refusing to raise the price of the beloved hot dog to prioritizing employee care and lifetime customer value. Costco, honestly, is a masterclass in playing the long game and a brand that I have been studying for, I would say, a good couple decades. And full transparency, I just became a member, like, I think it was 3 years ago. Uh, and even more transparency, the reason I became a member is because I wanted pumpkin pie. So I spent, I don't know, $65 or whatever on the basic membership for a, I don't know, $5 pumpkin pie around the Thanksgiving time in November. Anyways, since then, I have become quite the savvy shopper at Costco. And actually, since I moved to Utah, I shop at the largest Costco in the world. Can you believe that? One of the locations in Salt Lake City is the largest Costco in the world. So not only do I love that, uh, I love that even more because as someone that lives with anxiety, to be able to walk through the largest Costco in the world and walk out in one piece is a fucking miracle. So let's get into it. What Building and Breaking is all about is I am going to be talking about brands that I have been studying for decades and brands that I have been studying for a few years. And if you reach out and say you want me to study a brand, it could be a brand I've never studied before. Now, when I talk about studying and analyzing, I want to make something very clear. From the beginning of my career, I have been leading, managing, reinventing, and growing brands. My first job on the business side of the business, I was 21 years old, and I was brought into, at that time, the largest professional beauty supply distributor to help them revive one of their top brands that they were struggling with. I was 21 years old. What the fuck did I know about brand management? I mean, honestly, nothing. But what I did understand is that I did have a gift. And that gift is to see things that not everyone sees. And that I was able to really peel back the onion, so to speak, and look at what the problems were with the brand and come up with solutions that were relevant to the audience. Now, if you've been following my company, Passion Squared, for any amount of time, you know that I talk about brand fundamentals literally every day because that's what we do. I truly believe that if our industry embraced brand fundamentals, there would be so much less dysfunction in salons and beauty brands, by the way. So, so back in February, I did a little thing on Facebook, and actually I did it on LinkedIn too. Facebook really responded. LinkedIn didn't say a word. And I mean, I kind of understand why. But I want to share with you the post back in February. And then we're going to get into some of the ways these learnings and these understandings around the brand apply to your business. Whether you're a salon owner, a hairstylist, esthetician, lash artist, tattoo artist, creative small business owner, or beauty brand. So this was my post. What we can learn from Costco, one of my favorite brands to study and buy pumpkin pie from. Costco is that brand, the one that does not flinch under pressure, the one that plays the long game. The one that understands trust isn't built overnight, but it can be lost in a second. They protect their member relationship at all costs. I mean, because Costco is a membership model. It's not a discount card, but it's a commitment. It's a relationship between Costco and their customer. There is clear value, and they earn trust through that. They don't touch their sacred cows. A sacred cow would be something that you don't want to mess with. And in this case, you could look at that as the Costco hot dog. You could look at that as what's called a loss leader, which is the rotisserie chicken, meaning they're not profiting off that item, but that item creates so much value for the brand. So at one point in an article, the CEO of Costco said, if you raise the price of the hot dog, I will kill you. Figure it out. It was in a meeting. It's a famous quote. Because they understand brand value and trust. They're not in the hot dog business. So why would they mess with that? And they understand that because they understand their brand and they understand what their members value, which is so, so critical. And that hot dog is part of their brand promise. It's part of the experience. Now, I don't eat hot dogs personally, but if you've ever heard about Costco or if you are a Costco member, I mean, it's part of the experience. Whether some people like the pizza, I've heard. I have not eaten at Costco like that at their concession stand, but it's iconic for Costco members. So the $1.50 the hot dog, $1.50, the rotisserie chicken, $4.99. They are proof that Costco values people over short-term profits, not profits, because we got to have profits if we're in business to generate revenue, to be able to create experiences, to pay our workforce, all of that. Profit's not bad. But when you put the profit ahead of the people, that's where sometimes brands get into trouble. They don't need the profit from that hot dog and that rotisserie chicken. As I said, that creates so much more value than the few cents that they are, quote unquote, not profiting off those items. Another thing Costco does is they prioritize high lifetime client member value over short-term wins. So lifetime customer value, which is known kind of in the business space, I call it lifetime client value, is the amount of revenue, referrals, happiness, and joy that client or customer brings you over the lifetime of the relationship. So we hear often in our industry talk about retention. And retention, if we really kind of break it down into why it matters and why it's important, is because the value of a client isn't always understood or seen. And you could have a client that has been coming to you for 10 years and has sent 400 other clients to your business. And they visit like religiously every 6 weeks, every 8 weeks, every 12 weeks, whatever. And so they would have a high lifetime client value. And so when we look at Costco, they do understand their lifetime member value. They understand that they need to make decisions that are aligned with what their members value, as opposed to spending all day, every day trying to acquire new members. So that would be new clients versus existing clients. It costs less money to retain than it does to capture new audiences. They invest in their team and their team invests in them. And in this series, in this podcast series, I want to be clear. This is a great place to say this. This is not about perfection because there's no brand that's perfect. There's no person that's perfect. This is about the lessons, the insights, and the wisdom that analyzing brands have and how that applies to your business. So it's no secret they have low employee turnover, and they always have. And typically, when there is low employee turnover, that means that employees are happy. And I mean, simple, simple, not easy. Simple, not easy. But that speaks a lot to leadership. And again, that speaks a lot to brand promise. Because when we look at the brand story framework that I use, and I've actually used for decades, brand purpose, what problems are you solving? Brand promise, how you solve those problems. Brand people, who you solve problems for. And then brand products and services, the solutions that you provide to help solve the problems of your people. So when you are a salon owner that has an employment-based salon, you have a brand story for your clients and you have a brand story for your team. If you're a lease-based salon, you have a brand story for clients, brand story for tenants. If you're an independent solo business, you have brand story for clients. If you get assistants, then you have brand story for assistants. Because different audiences, right? Different audiences, different problems you're solving, different solutions, different promises. And the thing that really, really speaks to Costco is they know who they are. And that goes back to clarity of brand story. They don't waver. They don't waver. They stay true to that compass, to that GPS. They're not chasing trends that don't align with their brand. They're not doing things that don't align with their core values. They're not looking for quick cash grabs. They are steady. They are consistent. And consistency builds trust. I mean, that's just a universal truth. Consistency builds trust. Consistency doesn't mean boring. Consistency doesn't mean not innovating. Consistency means in the context of brand story, how brands are built and trust is broken. Consistency in the eye of what the promise was, what the brand promise was. And Costco does that so incredibly well. So if we think about what that actually means for the brand, how has Costco remained so steady, so consistent? A few examples. You know, in the last several years, or last handful of years, it's no secret that food prices went up. I mean, in the United States. I mean, we know that. Driven by inflation, some driven by price gouging, and profit taking and money grabs, right? But Costco stayed true. Costco stayed true. And that is part of their brand promise, right? That consistency. And so that built trust. It certainly didn't broke it. They may have taken a hit. In fact, I'm sure they did take a little short-term profit hit, But going back to that lifetime member value, that lifetime customer value, it was worth it to them. It was worth it to them. And, you know, recently, it's no secret in the United States, there has been a lot of pushback on DEI. And we've seen that with Target, and Target is a brand I will be profiling in this podcast sooner than later. But Costco didn't cave. They're like, no, this is who we are. This is what we believe. And that's it. Like that just period. Just period. Because again, they don't waver from their core values, from their brand promise. And it's the leadership that makes sure that they don't waver. We've seen brands that have wavered and the backlash that comes with that. If it's a brand promise that really mattered to the customer, right? If it really mattered to the customer. So, I mean, we can all read the news. Target sales are down, Costco sales are up. Consistency wins, trust wins. It just does. Keeping our promises even when it's difficult, And that just drives revenue, right? They have a cult-like customer following, employees with low turnover, over a 90% membership renewal rate. These are all indicators that they are staying true to their brand promise. And so as we go through these episodes, these are the type of analysis that I will be sharing with you, because they are universal. Brand fundamentals are universal. They are not unique to Costco. They're not unique to Apple or Target or Starbucks or Elf Cosmetics or any brand or salons, right? So I have talked forever about consistency builds trust, right? So one of the things that I see, again, it all comes back to lack of clarity of brand story, but one of the things I see that creatives do, this is not unique to the salon industry, this is in general, creators are like, I just need to rebrand. We just need to like make things look prettier. Well, first of all, that's brand identity. That's not brand strategy or story. Brand identity is the look and feel, the logos, fonts, colors, right? Aesthetic, photos, Instagram, the look and feel of the Instagram. So inconsistencies pop off very often in the salon industry. Pricing inconsistencies, communication inconsistencies, those types of things. So when you look at your brand, again, it always starts with brand story because that's the foundation of every decision you make. You want to look at, even though you're like, oh, well, I saw some Instagram that so and so said I should do this. Well, not necessarily, because it's always going to come back to your brand, and every brand is different. So I see a lot of inconsistency in experience, the actual client experience, inconsistency in menus, inconsistency in pricing, and, all that type of stuff. So consistency builds trust. It's not easy, but it's a lot easier, and it's simpler when you have clarity of your brand story. Long term and short term. We're talking about Costco playing the long game. Brands are built over time, right? Brands are built over time. And the long game means making difficult decisions in the short term for that, again, that lifetime member value, lifetime customer value, lifetime client value. So we're not chasing trends. We're not doing money grabs. We're not doing that. We're looking at short term versus long term. So an example of that would be in your client agreements. Client agreements have gotten so fucking out of control, particularly over the pandemic, because somebody confused healthy boundaries with walls and just being difficult to do business with, which I've done a million podcasts on that. We're not going to get into that. But this is a great example of short term versus long term. So, short term would be a client with a very high lifetime client value. They've been a client for 4 years. They've sent 100 clients to you, and they missed their appointment by accident, and you blast them on the internet or charge them $500 missed appointment fee or whatever. It's like, really? 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 When we look at the long game, when we look at long term, we're like, yeah, shit, that sucks. They missed their appointment. That's not like them. It's just very unusual. They are super valuable as a client. I love creating experiences for them. I'm just going to waive the missed appointment fee. So that's an example. So when we talk about that consistency, when we talk about building trust, when we talk about that, we're talking about clear communication. We're talking about delivering consistent experiences and not getting distracted by the shiny objects. Social media is awesome and social media is awful. The awful part of social media is that people that don't have clarity of their brand story are literally jumping on all of these out of context, random recommendations and trends that are not aligned with your business, not aligned with your brand. So I really want you to think about that when you're looking at the overall client experience, or you're looking at the overall team experience, you're looking at the overall tenant experience, playing that long game, really doubling down on consistency, because that consistency builds trust. Now, if you're a professional beauty brand listening to this podcast, which honestly, I hope you do. One thing I can promise you on this podcast is there's no tea here. That's not who I am as a person. I'm not here to rip a brand apart. I'm here to simply talk about facts, which for public companies are available to everybody. But again, facts, I've been studying these brands for decades, and some highly educated, experienced opinions, right? So mostly facts though, and a lot of truth. Um, but really, we have seen over, I mean, I've been in this industry for decades, that we have seen over time where some brands forget who brought them to the party. And, I look at Costco. Costco never forgets who brought them, who got them to where they were, their team and their members. And they stay true to serving both. And, I know that most professional salon brands are not really professional anymore. This is nothing new. E-commerce started a long, long, long time ago, and there are many brands that sell direct to consumer. And the question is, can you serve two different customers? I believe you can. It's harder. It's a lot harder, but it's possible. And the professional beauty brands that understand this are probably doing okay. The ones that don't are not. Because the consumer is very different than the hairdresser. So we have to remember who we serve, how we serve, why we serve, and what they value, what these people value. The other thing is, I talk about Costco and that long game. They just don't waver because they have such clarity of their brand story. They have so much clarity of their brand story. They don't waver. And a lot of times, I have seen this over my decades in the business side of the business. Brands, professional beauty brands, just start jumping on these, like all these different trends and things that don't align with their brand. Um, Lots of rebranding, aka changing of the packaging. When the problem is the last of your problems is your packaging. Um, so it's hard. This is hard. It's hard work. Look, I built global professional hair care brands. I reinvented struggling professional hair care brands. Um, it's not easy, but it's certainly possible. So really understanding what the root cause, if you are a professional beauty brand having problems, you have to get to the root cause of that. And 9 times out of 10, I promise you, it's not another ad campaign. It's not hiring a celebrity spokesperson. It's none of that. It's something deeper. It's something deeper. And in my experience, it is not staying true to the salon and the hairdresser. And again, you can do both. We're doing context and nuance in this podcast. We're not doing black and white thinking. We're not doing absolute extreme thinking, but just something to think about. And again, that's true for all brands. That's true for all brands. So Costco has proved that trust isn't just a strategy. Like it's not a brand strategy. It's a business strategy. And it's possible for all of us to focus on the long game, to not waver from those core values, those brand promises. It's hard. It takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of clarity, and it takes a lot of care. So, my question to you this week is, how are you playing the long game? What does consistency look and feel like to you and to those you serve, whether it's your clients, your teams, your tenants? How are you staying focused on those brand promises? How are you delivering those? Do you even know what your audience values? Those are just some reflections and things to think about as we go through these brands. Thank you so much for listening to our first episode. If you have questions, and I love questions, you can email awesome@passionsquared.net. Awesome@passionsquared.net. You can also DM me on the Passion Squared Instagram at Passion Squared, um, or my personal Facebook page, Nina L. Kovner. I shared last week when I made the announcement that I was changing the podcast, that this is kind of this is a project that I created for me. This is what I was sharing with our A school members last night. This is my selfish play, and selfish not in a bad way. I do this all day. Even though I left the executive world, 15 years ago, this is in my DNA. And so I do this all the time. I literally have conversations with myself. I am studying 1, 2, 3, 4 brands a week. If you could see my notes app, this has been going on for the last 15 years. And I have worked tirelessly to bring brand fundamentals to the salon industry because it doesn't exist. And it is one of the major reasons that we have the systemic dysfunction that we have in our industry. I know it's simple, but it's not easy, but I'm not giving up. I am committed. I am committed for as long as I have breath to help you have more context, more confidence, more clarity, more courage, ultimately to feel more joy in your journey. And so many of the problems in our industry are systemic, and they have existed forever, long before the internet, long before TikTok, long before Instagram, long before any of it. And a big part of that is lack of understanding of brand story, brand strategy, fundamentals. So thank you for listening to Building and Breaking with Nina L. Kovner. How brands are built and trust is broken. It is my honor and privilege to have this platform and to be able to share with you something that I just fucking love. I hope you have a peaceful day. Remember to be where your feet are, and I'll see you next week. Bye. Welcome back to Building and Breaking, where we talk about how brands are built, trust is broken, and what salon owners, hairstylists, and beauty brands can learn. My name is Nina. I'm your host. And today, yes, once again, we are going to be talking about one of my favorite brands. Now, this is another brand I've been studying for decades and only became like a real, like fanatical customer in the last like 6 years. Like it's interesting. I've shopped with this brand, but I've haven't been as obsessed with it as I have in the last few years. And that brand is Trader Joe's. We got to talk about it. So today here's what we're not talking about today. We're not talking about the $3.99 eucalyptus that I am obsessed with and buy all the time. We're not talking about everything but the bagel seasoning, even though, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm stocked up on that, or those dark chocolate peanut butter cups. Oh my God. Anyways, no, what we're talking about is a masterclass in brand clarity and decision making and consistency and alignment in everything they do. Everything Trader Joe's does is intentional, as is everything they do not do. And that's where we're going to focus. Does Trader Joe's do delivery? Nope. Self checkout? Nope. Coupons? Nope, 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 nope. And why? Well, we're going to get into it. But bottom line is they're clear. They're consistent and they don't budge. They understand that each decision that they make has an impact on the experience, on that brand promise. That is why their customers are so obsessed with them. And this is not something like I need to Google and research. This is just how brand story and strategy are aligned with decisions. This is my expertise, of course, but they're just such a great example of how staying aligned and focused wins every time. Even with the chaotic parking lot, right? Even with all that tension, all of that, we still go. We still go. And when I say we, I mean the people that are obsessed with Trader Joe's. So we're going to break it down and bring it back to you, salon business and beauty brands. So the first thing is, and the foundation is, their brand story is loud and clear and they stick to it. They are about small neighborhood market. They are about adventure and fun. They are about affordability, value, and high quality. They're about unique products with this deep human connection. They are not trying to be everything to everyone. And they're not competing with the stores that do couponing, that do self checkout, that do delivery. They didn't jump on any of those things. They're like, nope, we know that each one of these things is going to have a negative impact on our brand promise, the reason why our customers come back, come back. So when we look at that from a salon perspective or a beauty brand perspective, you're not for everybody. And we see those like those quotes going around Instagram, we're not for everyone. But do you really understand what that means and how your brand story is the filter? Is the filter. And the more clear you get on who you are for, I mean, everything falls into place. Simple, not easy. So, I mean, with beauty brands, clarity in, positioning and really understanding that I actually just shared something on Facebook and LinkedIn about this morning. Getting clear on your audience. And I know that even the term pro beauty brand is kind of like, kind of not a thing anymore because the majority, not all, remember, we're not doing absolute black and white thinking here. We're seeking context and nuance. However, most pro beauty brands aren't really pro anymore, right? They sell direct to consumer. They may be an Ulta, Sephora, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't mean that they still can't serve the salon pro, but you have to get really clear and specific about who you are serving and how you are serving and aligning all of that with that brand promise. So why did Trader Joe's decide not to get into the delivery game, whether it be direct delivery or Instacart or whatever? Because they could have, but they didn't. And a big part of, and again, this is my observation and analysis. I don't know anyone at Trader Joe's. I did not talk to them. I did not read a research report on Trader Joe's or anything like that. But it makes sense to me because the in-store experience is literally the brand. It's finding the new items. It's being bummed about things that are seasonal or discontinued. It's the neighborhood vibe. It's small. It's intimate. It's discovering things you didn't even know you needed. And it's that connection with their crew members. I'm going to talk about this several times throughout this episode, but the crew members, I don't know about you, but I love reading like the memes and the content about the Trader Joe's crew members and how incredibly friendly they are and how they're asking questions all the time. And I love the memes about it. I love the posts about it, but it's all by design. It's all by design. And it's driven by their brand story, in particular, their brand promise and that human connection. That's the magic. That's the differentiation. That's what makes Trader Joe's Trader Joe's. And when we remove that element, well, now slowly, well, I could really just, get my, XYZ somewhere else. So just because you can do something doesn't mean you should, right? And experience is everything. We've talked about that in literally every episode so far of this podcast. But when you're making any decision, which is, again, brand story is the foundation of every decision you make, you need to go back to that. You need to go back to center. You need to go back to Does this fit our brand story, our brand promise? Is this aligned with the outcomes and objectives I have? Because if the answer is no, well, then you kind of have your answer, right? So just because you can doesn't mean you necessarily should. So, quite current in discussions in the industry right now, for pro beauty brands. I very much understand the options of distribution channels. Like I get it. I understand the math. I was there. I get it. I pay attention. I get it. But just because you can sell on Amazon doesn't mean you should. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying, right? So for some brands, a move to mass distribution wouldn't really have a big impact. There would be maybe a little you know, a few people kind of pissed off for a minute, but it wouldn't have a significant impact. And then for other brands, it has a major impact and an impact you may not feel right now. Because typically, what happens is the decisions that we make, we don't necessarily have this big, oh shit, like everyone's pissed off. I lost all my clients or lost all my customers. That's not the way it works. It works slow. It's slow and it's not always obvious until one day we wake up and we're like, oh shit, what happened? So that's why these everyday decisions are so important. Okay. So self checkout, why don't they do self checkout? Well, that goes back to the crew members, right? The crew members are such a critical part of the Trader Joe's experience, what their differentiation. So self checkout from an efficiency thing, from a cost thing, when we look at, grocery stores are like, oh, well, we can eliminate XYZ checkout people and that's going to go straight to the bottom line and blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's the way things work, right? But that decision could cost them dearly depending on the brand. And in the case of Trader Joe's, that decision would cost them dearly because, again, such a big point of difference for them is the crew member. And are those conversations that we are having when we are at the checkout, right? So just because it's fast and easy, just because it could impact the bottom line short term, it's kind of like discounting, which we'll get to in a minute. Impact the bottom line short term from a long term perspective, it completely erodes the point of difference. It erodes the human connection, everything that Trader Joe's is built on. The crew members are trained this way, right? They're trained to tell us about what's going on, to ask us which our favorite thing is, or to say like if you get whatever thing you get, they're like, oh my gosh, I love that, or oh, I haven't tried that yet. Let me know what you think of it. That's literally their job, is to engage, and they do it authentically because I mean, it's they join the brand for a reason too. So are they naturally that friendly? I mean, I think you have to have some sort of friendly DNA to sign up to work at Trader Joe's for sure, but it is by design. It's how they hire, it's how they train, it's what they value. And that is crystal clear from recruitment to hiring to onboarding to ongoing training to coaching, just like in the salon. Everything is by design and it all comes back to your brand. So, team handbooks, onboarding processes, hiring, training, career pathing, all of that. All of that. So, clarity of brand, that's where it starts. So, we have to be mindful of that in our own businesses. And if human connection is something people value, and I'm going to tell you right now, it is more and more as we get more, attached to the internet, as AI continues to evolve. Yeah, human connection, it can be a point of difference. Real human connection, right? Not fake. So with beauty brands, you look at the education teams, the corporate representatives, all of that. Is there a true connection? Is there a real connection? Some of the coolest brands that I have seen, and I'm not talking about Trader Joe's with this statement, but some of the coolest brands I've seen, and the ones that tend to get a lot of attention these days, I would say in the past 10 years, the internet age, the real big internet age, are the ones who have leadership present online, right? That are engaged with a community, that aren't sitting in a boardroom and invisible. Thus, personal brands becoming so much more important. We talked a little bit about that in the Taylor Swift episode. Okay, so discounting, couponing, Trader Joe's doesn't do that. How come? Well, I mean, their whole market position is value, right? The whole market position is value. Everyday fair pricing. It's not messy. There's no guessing. There's no apps. There's no loyalty points. There's no do this, and then you get this. It's all designed to support the brand promise. Everyday fair pricing, unique product offerings, ethical product offerings. So they don't need to do all the song and dance, dog and pony show bullshit. It's just clear and it's simple. And customers like that. I mean, don't we all, to be honest? So that clarity, that consistency, that simplicity builds trust. And I've talked about this for forever. Discounting teaches people to ask for discounts and look for deals. And there are discount brands, there are value brands, right? There's also premium brands and luxury brands. But unless you're like a discount brands, you got to be super mindful of that. Again, we're talking about short term versus long term, right? So in the short term, if we go back to some of those like discounting platforms from I don't know, 12, 13, 14, 15 years ago. I don't even remember the name of them. Isn't that crazy? Anyways, oh my, Groupon. So something like Groupon, where people are like, oh shit, I can like generate $10,000 in 5 minutes. And it's like, uh, okay. And then look what happened, right? The impact of that. The impact of that could have been the system wasn't set up to generate 10 grand in 5 minutes. Or it could have been the impact of that 10 grand in 5 minutes took away 20 grand in the business because the entire team walked out because they were asked to do 50 gazillion more things than the system was set up for them to do, etc. So discounting, it damages the value, right? You can create value. Trader Joe's proves it. You can create value in your products and services. But this excessive discounting, you lose differentiation and you lose long-term brand value. So they don't need to do that. And, Trader Joe's, they don't chase trends, right? They're not like, oh, this is who we are today. This is who we are tomorrow. This is who we are. They have been consistently who they are for decades. And I've talked about this a lot on different episodes. We talk about this a lot with our clients. And a big problem I see with salons, I also see with beauty brands, is that there's this like urge to like create a whole new brand identity when things are not so awesome, right? Let's say like revenue's just been shrinking or seems like you're losing um, your community or engagement is down or whatever. And it's like, I know, let's completely change all of our packaging. And then like, oh, we're going to change our packaging. Oh, we're going to change our brand identity. Oh, we're going to change our logo. Oh, that's not always the answer. I'm not saying it's not the answer. In some cases, it may be the answer. Generally speaking, though, it's not. The problems are not that. That's not the problem. So there's nothing wrong with evolving brand story, evolving brand identity, but this continual change of this is who we were 2 years ago, but we're going to be totally different next year. That doesn't work with consumers, not long term, right? And we're always looking at lifetime client value, lifetime customer value, the amount of happiness, joy, referrals, and revenue that client brings you over the lifetime of your relationship. That's what we're looking at, right? So clarity wins. Clarity always wins. Simplicity always wins. Consistency always wins. So, you know, oh, Trader Joe's. You know, I got to bring in a personal story here. So, there's Southwest Airlines was, oh, we haven't done Southwest yet. Oh, we're going to do Southwest. Southwest Airlines really was an innovator in the autonomy of their team members. They were allowed to make decisions like the gate agents and the flight attendants, and they were allowed to really be themselves and add this like flair and uniqueness and human connection. Starbucks, again, we talked about this in last week's episode. So with Starbucks and the baristas and the dress code and how the idea that they want to get back to like local community, but then made a decision around dress code that was completely the opposite of what they said they wanted to move back towards. Your people are the brand, right? Every person represents the brand. And one thing I love, one of the many things I love about Trader Joe's is that consistency. So a couple years ago, I was at my Trader Joe's. I don't know if you do that also. Or I'm like my Trader Joe's, so that would be like your main store. It could be whatever, my wherever you go. My Costco, my Trader Joe's. Um, so I was at Trader Joe's on Saturday morning. I go first thing in the morning. Well, I used to. Now I have to drive 40 minutes to Trader Joe's, which is fine because I still do it. But when I was back in Portland, it was 5 minutes away. So I was there first thing. They open at 8 a.m. And I went to buy that. I don't know if you've ever had this, that chocolate sheet cake. Oh my God, it's so good. And I was buying it for a special and sad occasion. And of course, the crew member's like, oh my gosh, I love that cake. What's the occasion? And I said, well, I'm buying this for my friend's birthday. It's their birthday today, and they passed away a few years ago. And I don't know, I just felt like was the way to remember her because I know she would have really loved this cake. The crew member stopped, looked at me, and said, "This one's on us." I was stunned. Kind of like I am now recording this episode, choked up. And yes, duh, of course, I cried. This one's on us. That's connection. That's humanity. And that is so much more valuable than the few pennies they would have made off that one stupid yet delicious little sheet cake. This one's on us. So this wasn't about policy. This wasn't about approval. This wasn't about anything but embodiment of Trader Joe's brand story, and in particular, their brand promise. I will never, ever, ever forget that moment. So when we're looking at policies, we're looking at rules, we're looking at empty performative mission statements. That's not what it's about. It's about moments like this one's on us. That's what builds lifetime client value. That's what builds lifetime customer value. That is priceless. So, you know, you don't have to love Trader Joe's. Just you don't have to love any of the brands we talk about on this podcast. My whole purpose here is to help you understand the connection between brand story and strategy, building brands, how trust is broken, so you can make more aligned decisions. So you can feel more confidence, more clarity, have more context, right? Your brand story is your North Star. It's your GPS. It's your foundation. It's your compass. And it's something that I continue to see missing in our industry. Some of the most brilliant minds talking about business classes and advice. And it's like, but yeah, how do you give pricing advice without understanding brand story and market position? Because they're connected. Pricing is driven by market position, brand. And of course, cost of goods are part of it, but that's not what drives it. So it's your foundation for literally everything. And Trader Joe's shows us, because sometimes I see people, especially creatives, so I totally understand, kind of get bored. Like, why it feels almost restrictive, but it's actually the opposite. When you have this clarity of brand story like Trader Joe's do, it's actually freedom. Trader Joe's is fun. Having clarity and being consistent isn't restrictive. It's actually awesome because you don't have to worry about everything all the time. You're not continually reinventing and being inconsistent with your decision making and being overwhelmed by having to make decisions in the first place. The clearer you are, the more joy you feel, right? The more we can focus on those relationships and that human connection. That's such an important lesson that we get from Trader Joe's. Even when the parking lot's chaotic, even when things are imperfect, it's always going to come back to clarity and consistency. And Trader Joe's is such a beautiful reminder of that. I would love to hear your feedback on this episode. I am loving getting feedback on these episodes. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. And I also realized I don't know, is this our sixth? I think this is our sixth episode. I haven't talked at all about the Creating Your Awesome Brand course, which is available to Beauty Pros. I made it for Beauty Pros. It's an evolution of the same course I've been doing for, I don't know, 12 years, really since the beginning of Passion Squared. And I want to just explain why. Passion Squared started as a company that was going to help empower the professional beauty space around the social and digital revolution. Because at the time in 2012, most people are like, oh, Facebook's dumb, it's a fad, whatever. So as I began working more intimately with salon owners and stylists and even beauty brands, I realized how little brand fundamentals people understood because when you're talking social and digital, your content is your marketing. So to understand how to create content and storytell and do all of those things, we have to have clarity of brand. So it was the first workshop that I built that I conducted online and conducted a gazillion of them offline as well over the years. So yeah, that's what I do. I have a course. It's all fundamentals. And I have it linked. I have it linked everywhere. It's available to you everywhere. And I truly believe after my first 25 plus years working on the salon side and the brand side, and then the last 13 years working directly with salon owners and stylists and some brands. I truly believe that lack of understanding of brand story strategy is one of the reasons we have such systemic dysfunction in the beauty industry. So many of the problems that I see people facing are the same problems that they were facing 20 years ago. Not everything can be solved with brand story clarity, but a majority of what I see every day can be solved with clarity of brand story. So that's my little commercial, my little plug. Creating Your Awesome Brand, a complete course for beauty pros. We go through brand story, development, of course, because that's foundation. We go through naming, we go through brand identity, we go through online marketing, offline marketing, pricing as strategy, healthy boundaries and communications like agreements and stuff like that. Yeah. So Creating Your Awesome Brand. If you have any questions, you know where to find me at Passion Squared, literally everywhere. I would love to hear your stories. If you've been to Trader Joe's, if you love Trader Joe's, I'd love to hear about it and why you love Trader Joe's. If you don't love Trader Joe's, I'd love to hear about that too. Because again, they're not for everyone. They're not for everyone, but they are crystal clear on who they are for. And that's the lesson. That's the lesson. And that is the reminder that every decision you make is driven by your brand story. I'm so grateful you're here. Thank you so much for listening. And we'll be back next week with another brand breakdown. Have a peaceful day. Bye. Hello, loves. Welcome back to Building and Breaking, a podcast where we talk about how brands are built, trust is broken, and what salon owners, hairstylists, and pro beauty brands can learn. I'm Nina Kovner. I'm your host. And today, we're talking about another one of my favorite brands. I know. There's a lot of brands that I love. And there, there's a purpose behind all of this. It's all intentional. It's all by design. And there are just so many lessons that we can learn from so many different brands. And again, you don't have to love these brands, but you certainly can take away the wisdom and the lessons. So today we're talking about In-N-Out. Yep. In-N-Out. Look, I'm a SoCal born and raised, and In-N-Out, was literally part of my childhood and yeah, lots of memories. And In-N-Out is way more than a burger place. It is a memory, and it's a brand we can all learn something from. In high school, after parties, yes, we had parties in high school. And just a little context, I did graduate in 1984, so we're talking about this is a long time ago. We headed straight to In-N-Out, the one right off the 5 freeway in San Juan Capistrano. And it was a place where we could gather and eat some burgers, some fries, share some vibes and comfort food after, the parties. And decades later, today, here we are in 2025. I don't eat burgers, but I do still study and admire the brand because In-N-Out didn't just build trust through hype or continually reinventing themselves like Starbucks keeps doing, or being all things to all people. They built their brand through consistency. And 77 years later, they continue to grow and create happy customers. So this is really a story about clarity, focus, long-term loyalty and value. And what happens when you, and I know this is going to ruffle some feathers, stay in your lane. I'll share some context about that in a minute. Stay in your lane and build with intention. So we talk a lot about brand story on this podcast, and a big part of the brand story framework, and just as a reminder, brand purpose, what problems are you solving? Brand promise, how do you solve those problems? Brand people, who are you solving problems for? And brand products and services, what solutions do you provide to help solve the problems of your people? So In-N-Out is just, I know I use the word masterclass a lot in this podcast, but they really are in brand promise because the brand promise is the experience. It's the how. And In-N-Out's kind of like OG tagline was quality you can taste. And they built systems around that promise. That wasn't just the tagline, right? That was actually a promise. They didn't talk about the experience. They deliver it. They consistently deliver it. Consistency builds trust. Every touch point reflects care, intention, and consistency. Literally every location, every drive-through experience, every long fucking line waiting, every double, every animal style fries, that blah, blah, blah. The promise is so deeply embedded in their operations, in their hiring, in their training, in their experience design. So they're not big advertisers. They don't speak big mission statements. They don't do anything. They just deliver. And so that clarity of brand story, particularly the brand promise and how you design those experiences, you're not just saying like we're a luxury salon or we're an inclusive salon or we believe in healthy hair and scalps. You need to build systems that deliver on that promise. Operation systems, education systems, marketing systems, communication systems. And so, really, when we think about, I talk about it all the time, the experience is the brand. And it is all strategic and it's all by design. And it all begins with clarity of brand story. The real headline for this episode, however, is the power of a focused menu. Oh, I have so much to say. In and Out doesn't have chicken sandwiches. They don't have breakfast burritos. They don't have seasonal this and this and this and this. It's just burgers, fries, shakes, and soda. That menu is like an MBA in clarity, in focus, in understanding what their brand people value. And it's not just the menu, because when you think about each product, each service requires inventory, it requires training, it requires so many things to deliver on just a single service or product. So In and Out knows this. It simplifies their training. It increases their speed and accuracy. It reduces operational costs and waste, and it protects the customer experience. When we go back to the brand story framework, brand products and services, what solutions do you create and deliver that help solve the problems of your people? So when I say stay in your lane, I don't mean like you can't do anything else. That's not what that means. And we're not doing absolute black and white thinking in this podcast, right? We're seeking context and nuance. What I am talking about is that, and I've been talking about this for years, in how complicated salon menus have become and how many products brands continue to create. It creates distraction. It bloats the system. It weighs the system down, the entire supply chain, all the way through, all the way through. So when we think about that, that creates confusion, particularly in salon menus where most of them are in the language of hairdresser versus the language of consumer. I do a lot of work with our clients on simplifying their menus to be aligned with their brand and focused on who they serve, AKA the client. And it weighs the entire system down. So when you have a more aligned offering, service, or product, you have simpler marketing, you have simpler education, you have stronger execution, clearer communication. Again, it goes all the way down the line. And if you look at your sales, speaking generally, however, if you look at your sales, one thing I'm pretty sure of is that it's likely that 20% of your services are delivering around 80% of your revenue. It's the 80-20 rule. And the same goes for beauty brands. 20% of your products and or SKUs are delivering 80% of your revenue. Now, again, I'm not speaking to you, the listener, individually, because I don't know your brand. I haven't looked at your P&L, right? I don't have that opportunity. Now, for our clients, of course I do, but I don't know you individually, the listener. So I'm pretty passionate about this because I have experience. I have a lot of experience with this. One of the stories that I'll never forget. There are a lot of stories, a lot of experiences, a lot of lessons that I learned in my executive career. But I'll never forget, I'll never forget the time that I came to the owner of the company I was working for, who's fucking amazing. And I said, it's time to discontinue some things. And you would have thought that I said, like, I want to do something terrible. Like, it was like are you fucking kidding me? And I'm like, look, I get it. Like, it's a very successful company. And some of these products and SKUs I was recommending discontinuing generated a fuck ton of money. However, when you look at the big picture, what that was doing is it was clogging our entire supply chain, right? And it was weighing us down. And there were so many new products I wanted to launch that were more relevant and valuable to the market. And I did not want to continue to just add without remove. But, it's always a risk, but it was a highly educated strategic risk. And I'm happy to say it paid off. And after that initial conversation, I continued to do that through my entire career. Um, so it all applies. One of the brands that I studied a lot, and a brand I am going to feature on this podcast because I've been studying them for decades, is Southwest Airlines. And one of the greatest lessons I learned from Southwest Airlines very early in my career, which aligned so much with the philosophy of the company that I worked for and the genius behind the philosophy of the owner of the company I used to work for, is that Southwest's brand promise was about connecting people, right? You're free to move about the country. And air travel wasn't always accessible to people with less income, right? And so at the time, this was a very innovative move, right? To say, like, you know what, air travel does not need to be expensive. We're going to create a company and a brand that allows people to connect and create experiences with the people that they love, right? And through air travel, and one of the ways that Southwest did this, and they were profitable, I think, gosh, I didn't look this up, so don't quote me on this, but it was just recently in the last 10 years ish that they started to struggle. They had more consistent profitable quarters than I think any other airline in history. Again, don't quote me on that, but it's close to it. And one of the reasons this was not because they had high airfares, because they did not, but they chose to only have one type of aircraft. This is the lesson. And if you're a client of mine, you've heard this story so many times. They only chose to have one aircraft where most other airlines had multiple aircrafts, right? So they would have like um 777s and 747s and five, whatever the fuck, different aircrafts. But Southwest chose to have only one type. And what that did is that created massive efficiencies all the way through their business, right? They only had to inventory one type of airline parts. They only had to train on one type of airline maintenance. They only had all the way down the line. It created such incredible efficiency, so they weren't wasting money on multiple aircrafts, multiple inventories, multiple trainings. They were able to stay focused and pass that savings along to the customer. Now, of course, in 2025, Southwest Airlines, who have they have, speaking of air travel, talk about a bumpy ride. And again, they're on the list to feature in the podcast. Okay, so simplify. And that doesn't mean you can't offer valuable stuff. Yes, offer valuable stuff. You just don't need 80 million different things. It confuses the customer. And we are all customers, right? We're all clients. We're all customers. And ask yourself, really ask yourself, given, would you rather be given 50 options or four? Think about it. And this is really something we also talked about in the Starbucks episode. Okay, in and out. Consistency builds trust. I'm just going to repeat that. Consistency builds trust. Consistency builds trust. And it's hard to be consistent in this day and age. There's a lot of distraction. There's a lot of shit happening in the world. However, consistency builds trust. And that kind of goes back to that less is more, right? You want to be able to execute consistently. So if you have too many things, too many offerings, too many services, too many products, too many SKUs, it becomes more difficult to be consistent, right? So at In-N-Out, we don't have to wonder what we're getting at In-N-Out. We already know. And that's what builds long-term trust. It's not chasing trends. It's not being all things to all people. We're looking at consistency, building trust, and building high lifetime client and customer value, meaning the amount of happiness, joy, referrals, and revenue those clients or customers bring you over the lifetime of your relationship. It's your foundation. It's how we build trust. It's how we gain more referrals. It's how we retain. Consistency builds trust. Another thing I love about In-N-Out is they know who they serve. They understand their brand people very well. And again, they don't try to be everything to everyone. They know who they are. They know what they offer. They know who it's for. They resist the pressure. They stay focused on what their people value, and they deliver on what their people value. It's the fundamentals. It's the fundamentals. Executing consistently, right? Executing consistently aligned with your brand. Another thing I love about, another big lesson I love about In-N-Out is as we see like other restaurant chains grow too fast, right? They just open too many locations. It's a tale as old as time. Not for every brand, but it happens often. Over expansion. And then it's like, oh shit. Okay, let's start closing. You think about the stress that puts on the system all the way through the system. And In-N-Out could have scaled fast. They certainly have the money. They're privately held, but they didn't. They have expanded incredibly slow, which has allowed them to retain that consistency and that quality and that culture. So again, more isn't more. And that also could include actual locations or just fast growth in general without the systems to back it up. Because when we sacrifice quality or trust, we've kind of sacrificed everything. I have been asked many times over the decades, like, what is one piece of advice you would give to any business, but in particular salons who want to open a second location? And I mean, this is the lesson, right? And remember, systems fail more often than people fail. Systems fail more often than people fail. And typically, it's a lack of systems, a lack of preparedness, a lack of leadership at the original location. It spreads resources thin. It's not impossible. It is possible. It's happened. There are absolutely successful salon brands that have opened multiple locations, but it is difficult. Possible? Yes. Difficult? Yes. But it really comes down to the same lessons that we can learn from In-N-Out. Another super relevant lesson that I love about In-N-Out is they're not the cheapest burger, but they've always had fair aligned with their brand pricing because pricing is a function of marketing. It's not a feeling, it's not a vibe, it's not an out of context advice on the internet. Pricing is a function of marketing, it's a function of market position, luxury brands, moderate brand, value brand, discount brand. Pricing is a function of marketing. In and Out isn't the cheapest, but they are fair. They don't price gouge. They never have. Consistency builds trust. They don't exploit demand just because there's 500 cars in line, like spilling onto the streets. They don't look at that and be like, oh shit, let's double the price of our burger. Because that's not how pricing strategy works. I have just seen so much out of context, well meaning, but incorrect pricing advice in our industry. And I understand why. Most people don't have the education, the fundamental education when it comes to pricing strategy. It's not a salon thing, it's a business thing. And I recently saw someone post the only thing you have to understand about pricing is demand. And that's not true. Pricing is a function of marketing, pricing is a function of market position. Does demand come into play? Yeah, absolutely. But that's not the driver. If it was, In N Out burgers would be $50. And to contrast that, McDonald's fucked up. I mentioned McDonald's in another episode. Oh yeah, the Starbucks episode. I think we were talking about dress code. Anyways, if you pay attention, I pay attention. I study brands. That's what I do all day, every day, to better help my clients, our clients, and community. McDonald's price gouged. They took advantage of the inflation narrative, and it bit them in the ass. It hurt them. It made headlines how much it hurt them. Because different brands have different price points, different value that we place on them. Whereas, honestly, we probably would pay $10 for an In-N-Out burger. We're certainly not fucking paying $10 for a Big Mac. Different brands, different experiences, different brand promises, different. So what did McDonald's do? They started cutting back pricing, but they didn't have to do that. They could have just stayed strategic, right? They could have stayed strategic, but they chose not to. And every time you kind of do shit like that, you put some cracks in the trust, right? Whereas In and Out, they're not erratic, and they certainly aren't price gouging. They certainly don't exploit. They're consistent. Consistency builds trust. So In and Out's pricing reflects their brand promise, their market position, quality, value, integrity. So yeah, I could do a whole. Anyways, okay. So many lessons from In and Out. Okay. The other lesson, and this is all connected. Again, this is all connected to focus and staying aligned with your brand. So, a focus menu, simple systems, it makes everything simpler. It makes everything simpler. We think about Southwest, right? Business is hard as it is. We don't need to make it more difficult, not more difficult for our clients, our customers, our teams. If you're a lease based salon, your tenants. Simple is more. Simple is better. It's always better. And it's more difficult to simplify systems because inherently, we as human beings, for whatever reason, we like just think more, right? Oh, if we let's add this. Oh, so and so said, oh, so and so's doing this. That's why your brand story is your North Star. It's your compass. It's your GPS. It is the foundation for which you make every decision. So all of this creates higher lifetime customer value and client value. We know what to expect. And most clients and consumers don't need gimmicks for that. They need consistency. Consistency. Consistency builds trust. And In and Out doesn't do that by more. They do it through clarity. And that clarity allows them to build systems that deliver time after time after time. And remember, consistency isn't boring. Look, they have a secret menu. Everybody knows about it. Well, most In and Out people know about it. If not, you can see it on TikTok, right? You can see it on TikTok. In and Out knows who they are. They can have consistently delivered on that promise. And they've earned that loyalty, that fandom, that high lifetime customer value. One visit, one experience, one order at a time. So, I mean, consistency is the real flex, right? And building trust is how you build something that lasts. Remember that. Thank you so much for listening. If you are enjoying these episodes, I would be so grateful if you shared them with your business besties. And also, if you're listening on a podcast platform, if you would drop a rating or review, because what that does is that helps this podcast become more discoverable to those that can find value. And I truly believe that the more we focus on the brand fundamentals, the more we can minimize the systemic dysfunction that has exists in the professional beauty industry for the 4 decades I've been in it. I truly believe that. I do. I really believe that. And I am so grateful for you and for your feedback. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. And I know I mentioned this on a few of the earlier episodes. If you have a brand you want me to do a deep dive into on this podcast, please reach out and let me know. You can find me on the socials at Passion Squared. Email awesome@passionsquared.net or nina@passionsquared.net. Let me know. Let me know. I can't promise that I will, but I certainly want to hear from you and what is important to you, what you'd like to learn, what you'd like to take away from this podcast, what you value from this podcast. I appreciate you. And as I close this episode, since I am talking about being an LA native and born and raised and growing up on In N Out Burger, I just want to say LA, stand strong. Yeah. And I love you. All right, loves. Thank you for listening. Have a peaceful day. Bye.